The screen door creaked open, its familiar rhythm a low sigh against the crisp Christmas evening air. I sat in the old rocking chair, my fingers gripping its worn edges while I watched my family gather on the porch. Denise playfully nudged Marcus with her elbow, laughter bubbling between them. Their joy felt palpable against the cold air, a warmth that made me smile despite the weight of our family's troubles hanging over us like storm clouds. The holiday lights twinkled along the porch rail, casting soft shadows that danced with each gentle gust of wind. I could feel the pull of nostalgia tugging at my heart, mixing seamlessly with anxiety about what might unfold tonight. Do we really have to go through this again? Samuel's voice cut through the chatter, his brow furrowed as he adjusted his glasses. He was already tense, and it only took one small spark to ignite his irritation. I shifted in my chair, feeling the chill creep up from the wooden floorboards into my bones. "Let's just enjoy tonight," I said softly, trying to soothe him and hoping to diffuse any budding conflict. Leonard stepped forward then, clutching a stack of envelopes tighter than necessary. The way he held them, almost protectively, hinted at something important hidden within their depths. My heartbeat quickened. I didn't need to see the contents to sense they were anything but cheerful greetings. His gaze drifted around the group as if gauging our reactions before finally landing on me. "Helen," he began, his tone serious yet hesitant. My skin prickled as dread settled in my stomach. "What is it?" I asked, both curious and wary, hoping this wasn't going where I feared it might go. With a deep breath, he opened the first envelope and pulled out a document. "These are bills, major expenses we need to address immediately." As he spoke, I noticed Denise lean closer to Marcus, her confident demeanor faltering under this unexpected weight. A flicker of concern crossed her face when she glanced at me. $18,000, Leonard continued, reading off figures that felt like daggers plunging into our festive spirit. "And this is just for starters." My throat tightened as reality sunk in. This was not how I envisioned our family gathering ending, the holiday cheer overshadowed by financial burdens we could barely manage. I locked eyes with Samuel, his jaw clenched tightly, and I could almost see the wheels turning in his mind. He would want to confront Leonard about how we even got here, a conversation I knew would spiral into blame and anger if left unchecked. "Hold on," I said firmly, raising my hand to cut through the tension in the air. The motion felt foreign amidst all that had been said, but necessary nonetheless. Leonard paused mid-sentence but didn't lower his gaze. Instead, it hardened as if bracing for a fight. "What now?" he asked sharply. "We need to talk about this calmly," I replied slowly, choosing my words carefully as if handling fragile glassware. "Not here and not now." Samuel shook his head slightly but stayed silent for once. Perhaps he sensed that venting our frustrations amidst family wasn't wise tonight, not when everyone was already uneasy. "I suggest we take time, let's gather tomorrow morning instead," I decided boldly, wishing they would understand there was more at stake than money or honor right now. We needed unity more than anything else. We were teetering on the edge of fracture. Leonard stared at me incredulously, but then nodded slowly after what felt like an eternity of silence filled only by rustling leaves in our yard. It seemed an agreement hung heavy between us, even if unspoken, a tentative truce forged amidst troubles threatening to consume us whole. As I exhaled deeply, releasing some tension from my chest, Denise moved marginally closer to me with a knowing glance that stirred warmth beneath my skin. Her solidarity reassuring during an uncertain time like this one. "Fine," Leonard conceded reluctantly before crumpling one of the documents absent-mindedly in his fist, like discarded wrapping paper after gifts have been opened too hastily. But there was still something else lingering unaddressed. The uncomfortable truth about how these debts came to be or who was truly accountable for their origin remained shadowy in our midst. I glanced around at all their faces, Denise's concern etched plainly across hers, while Marcus maintained an unreadable expression. And suddenly wondered whether facing those shameful truths would bring us closer together or drive us further apart than ever before. The evening wore on with an odd mix of laughter and strained smiles as we attempted to weave back into holiday spirits, despite looming uncertainties overshadowing every cheerful moment shared outdoors. With every creak of that old rocking chair beneath me swaying gently back and forth under shifting weight, I recognized how easily relationships can become frayed, just as swiftly as they hold firm when tested by hardship. Just then, Denise approached me quietly, away from prying eyes, while Marcus kept watch over everyone else from far, a protective stance reminiscent of past Christmas gatherings turned awkward by misunderstandings. "Are you sure this is going to work?" she whispered anxiously, while brushing strands of hair behind her ear, a sign she was genuinely worried about what lay ahead for all of us without proper resolutions made tonight. I wanted desperately to reassure her that returning home tomorrow wouldn't end messy, but also knew deep in within my gut that unresolved issues rarely do so easily without confrontation first taking place. Even risking further harm before healing can begin anew amongst family bonds so often cherished, yet fragile under pressure. I blinked at the paperwork scattered across the table, feeling a weight settle in my chest. My fingers brushed against the cold metal of the stapler as I pushed it aside. "Mom, are you listening?" Jake's voice cut through the haze, sharp and urgent. I turned to look at him, his brow furrowed as he leaned forward on his elbows. "I am," I replied, forcing my eyes to meet his. The light overhead flickered slightly, casting an eerie shadow over the piles of documents. It felt like they were all closing in on me. Jake sighed, shifting in his seat. His hand brushed against a coffee cup, sending it skidding slightly along the table surface. The sound echoed in the quiet room. I could feel my pulse quicken at Jake's words. My stomach churned, reminding me of those days spent pacing while waiting for news. "I know we do," I said softly, biting my lip as I glanced at the clock ticking away on the wall behind him. The door creaked open and my sister Sarah stepped inside, her scarf trailing behind her like a cloud of uncertainty. She looked at us with wide eyes, sensing the tension thickening in the air. "Is everything okay?" Sarah asked instinctively, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear before crossing her arms tightly over her chest. "No," Jake replied, bluntly, glancing back at me for support. I could feel his vulnerability radiating from him like heat from a flame. I took a deep breath, weighing my options carefully. "We have to face this together," I said firmly, moving forward in my chair and clasping my hands tightly on the table. "Why don't we start by discussing what needs to be done?" Sarah suggested cautiously, her voice trembling slightly as she reached for one of the papers scattered between us. As she picked it up, I caught sight of the small photograph pinned beneath some forms. Dad smiling widely during a family barbecue last summer. That image reminded me how fragile our time together was becoming. "We could reach out to that lawyer again," I said, looking directly at Sarah now. "Get some clarity on things?" It felt like stepping onto unstable ground. Every word seemed laden with unspoken fears. Jake let out another breath he had been holding and nodded slowly. "Yeah, maybe that's smart." He ran his hand through his hair, as if trying to comb through confusion. Sarah's expression softened slightly, but lingered with doubt as she placed the photo back down gently. "But what if he doesn't want to fight anymore?" My heart sank even further as those words hung heavily between us. But there was no turning back now. We had taken steps deeper into this conversation than I ever expected. I leaned back in my chair and folded my arms tight across my chest, feeling exposed yet determined not to retreat any longer. The walls closed in around us while silence stretched thin. A moment later, Jake spoke quietly. "We can't give up hope." His gaze shifted from me to Sarah, then back again, like he was searching for reassurance. A shiver ran down my spine as uncertainty loomed large above us all. What would happen if we pushed too far? What if our decisions only fractured us further? The creaking screen door stirred memories of childhood, a fleeting glimpse of carefree days. Laughter and chatter once spilled through it, but today those echoes felt distant and heavy. Sitting on the porch, I watched neighbors pass by, their heads low in conversation. They knew what was unfolding inside my house. The air buzzed with tension, as if everyone had a stake in our family drama. Samuel shuffled beside me, his fingers tapping nervously against the armrest of the rocking chair. I noticed his hands were trembling, betraying his calm demeanor. This was supposed to be our sanctuary, yet the shadows cast by impending judgment loomed large. Marcus's laughter echoed in my mind, sharp and derisive. "Spare change," he'd said during the court proceedings, dismissing my financial contributions like they were nothing more than coins tossed into a wishing well. I gritted my teeth just thinking about it. Leonard stood up from where he had been fidgeting with the garden hose coiled at his feet. He stepped toward me with a furrowed brow, concern etched across his face. "Are you all right?" he asked softly, but his voice felt like sandpaper. I took a deep breath and pushed away thoughts of Marcus's mockery. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting an orange glow across the porch that reminded me of summer barbecues and laughter shared among family. Not this chaotic circus we now found ourselves in. "Let them talk," I replied to Leonard while adjusting myself on the rocking chair. His eyes flickered toward the street, as if expecting someone to emerge from the crowd of whispers beyond our gate. Just then, Denise walked down the path with her head held high, a stark contrast to her usual timid demeanor. Her presence sent ripples through both Samuel and Leonard. They shifted their posture slightly, clearly wary of her approach. Denise caught my gaze as she neared us, determination set in her expression. "You know," she began slowly while leaning against the fence post nearby, "there's more at stake here than just money." Her words hung in the air like smoke from a forgotten cigarette. I could feel Marcus's disdain still burning through me as if it were a brand left behind by his careless words. "What do you mean?" I asked sharply, wanting clarity amidst this chaos. My fingers drummed against my thigh anxiously as I awaited an answer that could shift everything we thought we knew. Denise pushed away from the fence and stepped closer to me. She lowered her voice conspiratorially while glancing around, as if fearing someone might overhear us. "I found something," she whispered urgently. A surge of adrenaline coursed through my veins. Curiosity mixed with unease tightened my stomach like a vice grip. What could she possibly have uncovered? My heart quickened as images flashed through my mind. A family's secrets buried and long-forgotten tales waiting to be unearthed. "Something about Mark," she continued with intent focus in her eyes, holding my stare firmly as if measuring its impact. "It changes everything." As she spoke these words, I leaned forward slightly in surprise, instinctively gripping the armrests tighter and blinking rapidly at her revelation. An unsettling flutter of hope mingled with dread churned within me. Before I could fully process her statement or respond with anything resembling coherence, she hesitated for just a moment too long, a split second that felt heavy between us, before she pressed on again swiftly. "I can't say more here," Denise insisted quietly but firmly, while pulling something small and folded from her pocket, a slip of paper, perhaps, a photograph. My pulse raced at this sign of potential change swirling in our midst, when suddenly Marcus's laughter reverberated once more in my memory. It twisted into something grotesque now that I associated it with humiliation rather than mirth. What was on that paper? Did it hold truths that would challenge Marcus's blatant disrespect toward our family bonds? The evening light faded further into twilight as uncertainty thickened around us like fog rolling into town after sundown. With resolve igniting within me, something truly worth fighting for, I made an unspoken choice to stand firm against whatever storm came next around us at this porch of secrets and hushed discussions. But even so, what exactly could Denise reveal that might turn the tides against Marcus once and for all? I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the half-empty mug of coffee. The steam curled up into the air and dissipated, much like my hopes for this morning. Just as I raised the mug to my lips, a loud crash echoed from the living room. My heart jolted and I set down the mug with a clatter, spilling a drop on the table. I hurried toward the noise, my pulse quickening. There, beneath a toppled bookshelf, lay my daughter Lily's laptop. Its screen cracked like a shattered mirror, reflecting her frustration back at me. "Lily," I called out, scanning the room for her. I needed to know if she was okay before assessing the damage to her precious device. She emerged from her room, eyes wide and tear-streaked. "It just fell over while I was trying to reach for something," she exclaimed. Her trembling hands clutched her phone tightly. Looking at her distraught expression, I made a decision. "Let's go to the store and see if we can get it fixed," I said gently. It would be an expense we hadn't planned for, but Lily needed reassurance today more than anything. As we gathered our things, I could feel a shift in the air around us. It felt heavier now, filled with unspoken tension. I glanced at Lily's phone screen, which showed a text notification from someone named Max. My stomach twisted with curiosity over who he was and what he meant to her. The courtroom held the faint scent of polished wood and paper, a sharp contrast to the brewing storm outside. I adjusted my grip on the court documents, feeling their weight shift slightly as I tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear. My stepson, Marcus, stood with his arms crossed, a smirk plastered across his face. He leaned casually against the wall, practically daring anyone to challenge him. A ripple of tension rolled through me as I caught the glint of the judge's gavel resting ominously on the desk. That gavel felt like a ticking clock, reminding us all that time was running out for our secrets to stay hidden. Denise, my daughter, shifted nervously in her seat beside Samuel. She avoided eye contact with Marcus, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of her sleeve. It was clear she was wrestling with something just beneath the surface. I cleared my throat softly, hoping to draw attention away from the growing unease. The judge entered, and everyone instinctively straightened up. My heart raced. This was it, the moment we'd been dreading. "Court is now in session," he announced firmly, his voice echoing through the room. I took a deep breath as he settled into his chair, exuding authority, as if he could sense our collective anxiety. As I opened my file to glance at the documents again, I noticed a folded piece of paper tucked inside. A note? My pulse quickened as I wrestled with curiosity and dread about what it might reveal. Marcus laughed lightly under his breath when he noticed my hesitation. "What's that? Spare change?" he sneered. His laughter rang out sharply, slicing through the tension like glass shattering on concrete. The gavel rapped against the bench suddenly, silencing him instantly. The judge's gaze turned stern as he looked directly at Marcus. "This isn't a joke," he said sharply. "We're here to discuss serious matters." I could feel heat rising to my cheeks as embarrassment mixed with anger coursed through me. "You think this is funny?" I snapped back at Marcus without thinking. He shrugged indifferently, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, perhaps uncertainty or guilt. The judge continued reading from the documents before him, and I focused intently on every word that left his lips. They felt like arrows aimed straight at our family dynamics, exposing vulnerabilities that had long been buried. When he finally read an account related to financial discrepancies involving Marcus's dealings, a hush fell over the room that felt heavy enough to crush us all. An awkward silence stretched between us as realization dawned on everyone present. Marcus was skirting dangerous waters financially and bringing all of us along for one hell of a ride. "Your Honor," Denise spoke up hesitantly, breaking through thick air filled with unanswered questions. "Marcus, you didn't tell us." Her voice trembled slightly but held resolve that radiated throughout her body. I glanced over at her and saw her jaw set tight, a mirror image of determination shining back at me. It stirred something deep within me. Maybe it was time for me to take charge instead of letting others dictate our fate. "Enough," I said firmly, feeling empowered by Denise's stance beside me. "We need to address this immediately." The words poured out like water from a dam bursting open after years of pressure building up beneath its surface. The judge raised his eyebrow at me in surprise, but nodded slowly in agreement with my assertiveness. Perhaps this wasn't just about honor, it was also about accountability for each member of our fractured family. For once, I felt a shift occur as whispers danced around us, the power dynamic beginning to lean toward me rather than against me. But then confusion washed over me as I recalled those cryptic lines in the note tucked in my court documents. Lines that hinted at deeper secrets yet undisclosed. What had Marcus really been hiding all along? I sit at the worn kitchen table, a stack of bills spread out before me like a mountain I cannot climb. The light from the single bulb overhead flickers intermittently, making the numbers dance and blur. My heart pounds against my ribs as I calculate again, hoping for a different result each time. Just then, the front door swings open, and my husband Mark bursts in with his usual carefree grin. It falters when he sees the state of our kitchen. He drops his jacket on the back of a chair and approaches me, concern creasing his brow. I can feel my breath quickening. This is not what I want to discuss right now. "Hey, everything okay?" Mark asks, glancing at the papers littered across the table. I can hear his hesitation in his voice. It grates against my nerves. I take a deep breath and decide to confront him about our financial situation head on. "No, it's not okay," I say firmly. "We need to talk about this before it spirals even further out of control." As I gesture towards the bills with an open palm, I sense tension settling between us like a heavy fog. His expression shifts instantly from worry to something more defensive. He folds his arms across his chest, creating distance between us. "What do you want me to do?" he snaps. His voice carries both frustration and exhaustion that matches my own. As silence hangs in the air, punctuated only by our breathing, I notice a small envelope tucked under one of the bills, marked urgent. My heart races anew as dread pools in my stomach. What else could they possibly want from us?
The sound of the judge's gavel hitting the wood jolts me back to a memory. I can almost feel the vibration in my hands as I clench my palms tight on the edge of my seat. Today, however, the air feels thick with tension. The courtroom is packed, and I can sense every eye boring into me, especially Marcus's. He sits across the room, his face unreadable, yet I know he relishes this moment. I take a deep breath, inhaling the faint odor of polished wood mixed with something sour from a nearby lunch tray, and try to focus. My heart races faster than it should. I'm not sure if it's fear or anger driving me. The judge adjusts his glasses and clears his throat, preparing to deliver an account that may change everything. As he speaks, Marcus leans back in his chair and chuckles lightly. It's a sound that cuts through me like glass, sharp and unforgiving. My stomach twists at the sight of him laughing about something so serious. The judge wraps his gavel down again, quieting the murmur surrounding us. "Order in the court," he calls out firmly, but even his strong voice does little to suppress the unease settling over me like a thick fog. "I'll show them spare change," Marcus mutters under his breath. His words hit like needles, each one driving further into my gut as I try to compose myself for what's next. Then there's Denise beside me, her hand resting lightly on my arm, a small gesture that offers some comfort but also raises questions about loyalty. She glances at me with concern etched across her features before looking back at Marcus with disapproval brewing beneath her calm exterior. But it's too late for support now. We're all on display here, navigating this complicated web of family ties and accusations within these walls meant for justice. When the judge announces my name and begins to read from the documents submitted by both sides, I lean forward instinctively, desperate to catch every word flowing from his mouth. Each syllable feels like a countdown, taking away our future, the fate of our family hanging in precarious balance. "Ms. Parker claims," the judge pauses briefly, scanning through pages layered on his desk like a stack of bricks ready to topple over. I gripped my purse tightly, my knuckles white against its leather surface, as if it could offer any semblance of control amid this chaos around us. The weight of those papers feels heavier than anything I've ever carried. Suddenly, there's an unexpected shift in atmosphere when Serena enters through the heavy wooden doors behind us. Her eyes dart around nervously before landing on me. She looks pale, yet resolute as she strides towards us with purpose. "What's going on?" she whispers urgently as she approaches. The tension between us crackles as if ignited by an invisible spark. Marcus smirks slightly at her arrival, but remains silent while confusion blooms inside me like wildflowers growing through cracks in concrete, a beautiful thing amidst despair. "Serena," I manage to say softly, despite how loud my thoughts scream for clarity. "They're reading the judgment." She nods slowly but tilts her head quizzically, as if piecing together information lost among shifting loyalties and unspoken grievances. There's strength behind those delicate features. Understanding glimmers in her gaze, even though uncertainty hangs heavily in the air between us all. The judge resumes speaking again, just as I catch Marcus snickering quietly under his breath at our exchange. That laughter tightens around my chest, an unbearable knot forming as realization dawns upon me. He doesn't see what's at stake here. He only sees entertainment in our pain. Determination surges within me then. I know what must be done to reclaim agency over this narrative spiraling out of control around us all. I rise abruptly from my chair while everyone turns towards me, wide-eyed in disbelief, including Marcus, who stops mid-chuckle, momentarily startled by my sudden movement forward into confrontation territory, where tensions brew and collide against expectations set long ago by family traditions. "Your Honor," I say boldly, with conviction echoing off every corner of this vast room, my voice unwavering despite trepidation tugging at edges of confidence, deep inside where doubt lies lurking always beneath surface awareness, waiting patiently for weak moments such as these. The gavel strikes once more sharply against wood, casting shadows across faces watching intently, and suddenly it feels less daunting standing here than I'd imagined mere minutes ago, frozen in fear where judgments loomed large overhead waiting judgment-free responses. Instead, offering pieces taken away without consent first, made whole again before leaving, unfulfilled promises lingering behind closed doors, forever marked indelibly in memories lost along paths we've traveled together long before today arrived abruptly. Interrupting lives intertwined so intricately, they feel almost familial still, even when fractured beyond repair sometimes, along lines drawn deceptively clear, yet blurred invisibly beneath layers built over years spent creating stories, shared amongst loved ones gathered close enough together, only distance led astray can sever bonds once thought unbreakable forevermore, unless fought fiercely against odds stacked high above heads, pressed low, seeking forgiveness sought desperately, among good intentions lost somewhere, amid chaos unleashed, unchecked. What will happen next?
The notary log lounged on the polished table, its leather cover bearing the stories of countless transactions. I traced my fingers over it, feeling its smoothness beneath my touch, as if it held secrets waiting to be unveiled. Marcus stood by my side, arms crossed tightly over his chest, his face set in a grimace that twisted my stomach. He had been mocking me just moments before, laughing about how my spare change couldn't possibly matter in this court. The judge was still sorting through our documents. "Do you really think you can win this?" he scoffed at me, his tone dripping with disdain. Each word felt like a jolt of ice against my skin. "Enough," I whispered under my breath, trying to keep the tremor from my voice. I was aware of Samuel's eyes boring into me from across the room. He had always been the mediator between us, until now. A silence fell over the courtroom as the judge finally lifted her gaze from the paperwork. She adjusted her glasses and began reading directly from the notary log. My heart raced with uncertainty. I could feel the weight of every eye on me. As she read, I noticed Serena sitting stiffly in her chair, clutching a pen like it was a lifeline. Her usual bravado was gone, replaced by an expression that mirrored my own anxiety. Beneath it all lay an unspoken truth we both knew, but had never fully explored. The judge paused for a moment before continuing, and I caught Marcus rolling his eyes dismissively. It was infuriating to see him act so flippantly when everything felt so heavy, so consequential. His laughter echoed in my mind fiercely. It made the knot in my stomach tighten even more. Then came the revelation, a detail that slipped past unnoticed until now. "It appears here," the judge emphasized while pointing to a line in the log, "that your stepmother's contributions were far greater than previously acknowledged." I barely registered what she said next as adrenaline surged through me. Marcus's smirk faded instantly, replaced by shock and disbelief. It was as if someone had pulled a rug under him. With that new information laid bare before everyone, I felt a shift within myself too. No longer just Helen Parker, the dismissed stepmother, I suddenly saw an opportunity to reclaim some respect and power in this situation. "What do you mean greater than previously acknowledged?" Marcus spat bitterly, desperation creeping into his voice as he shifted uneasily in his seat. "I mean you underestimated her role," the judge replied coolly, not letting anyone interrupt again. As she spoke, I realized that this wasn't merely about finances anymore. It was about honor and recognition, long overdue for me. In that electric moment of clarity, I resolved to speak up. "The contributions I've made are part of this family's foundation," I stated firmly, yet cautiously. My hands trembled slightly against the table where the notary log remained open, a testament to everything unfolding around us today. The ripple effect of those words was immediate and palpable. Trepidation hung heavily in the air like smoke after a fire has burned out, but left its mark behind. Even Samuel seemed taken aback by my unexpected fortitude. He cleared his throat nervously as if trying to regain control of our spiraling situation. "Let me remind everyone," Marcus shot back defensively while shifting again, anger radiating off him like heat waves rising from pavement on a hot day. But there was something heavier than money weighing down our exchange now. It was dignity and respect intertwined with emotions too tangled to easily unravel. Marcus leaned forward slightly in his chair when he sensed that others were beginning to side with me. A flicker of apprehension crossed his face as he realized he might lose ground here today. In this battle for honor, I found myself standing taller amidst newfound strength coursing through me. Yet just as quickly as empowerment bloomed within me, doubt crept back into view, like shadows lengthening at dusk. What would happen next? Would Marcus retaliate? Would he take steps to undermine what little credibility I'd just gained? As these questions filled my mind, I glanced down at the notary log once more. Its embossed letters glistened under fluorescent lights as they bore witness to everything unfolding around us. The tension crackled like static electricity waiting for release, holding us all captive on this precipice of uncertainty. I shift in my seat, the wooden bench creaking beneath me. The judge's gavel hovers just above her desk, poised like a bird ready to take flight. The room is heavy with tension. Every eye is on the judge as she prepares to deliver her verdict. I can feel my heart pounding against my ribcage, urging me to breathe slowly. It's almost suffocating, the anxiety hanging in the air like fog. My stepson Marcus sits across from me, arms crossed tightly over his chest. He wears a smirk that I find equally infuriating and hurtful. I want to reach out and shake him to demand he take this seriously for once. Instead, I grip the armrests of my chair until my knuckles turn white. "Are we ready?" the judge asks, her voice firm yet calm. A shiver runs down my spine at her words. Something in them sends an electric charge through the room. Just then, Denise, my daughter-in-law, shifts uncomfortably beside me. She fidgets with a thin silver bracelet around her wrist, her eyes darting nervously between Marcus and the judge. The clink of metal against metal punctuates the silence. In that moment, I remember our family gatherings around long tables filled with laughter and love. Now here we are, torn apart by greed and dishonor. My stomach knots at the thought of what has become of us. The judge finally sets down her gavel with a sharp thud that reverberates through my bones. I will not tolerate disrespect in this courtroom. Her gaze sweeps across us all before resting on Marcus, whose smirk falters slightly under her scrutiny. For a fleeting second, I think he might crack. Perhaps he senses that his bravado won't protect him here. But then it returns, the arrogance in his posture as he leans back casually, as if nothing matters more than his own ego. "Your Honor," he begins but gets cut off by the judge's raised hand. The noise feels like a slap in the face, a reminder that this isn't a game. With every tick of the clock on the wall behind her, I sense time slipping away from our grasp. Inaction becomes unbearable. I make up my mind and stand up slowly. "I have something to say," I declare firmly, surprising even myself with the strength in my voice. My hands tremble slightly as they rest against my hips for support. Behind me, whispers ripple through the gallery like water trickling over stones. The judge nods for me to proceed, while Marcus rolls his eyes dramatically at my interruption. It fuels a fire within me, a decision forged from desperation and love for what remains of our family. "I understand what you think about money," I start carefully, choosing each word with precision. "But this isn't about spare change or wealth, it's about honor." Each syllable seems weighted as it fills the space between us. Denise glances at me wide-eyed. Her expression is one of disbelief mixed with hope, a strange combination that makes my throat tighten slightly. Maybe she believes change is possible too. Maybe she hopes we can find common ground amidst this chaos. Marcus leans forward now, interest peaked, but still masking it beneath his cool exterior. The shift is palpable. Suddenly, he's no longer dismissive, but intrigued by what I'm saying, or perhaps just calculating how to twist it for his benefit. The judge lifts her gavel again, but stops short when I press on without hesitation. "No matter what happens today," I continue more fervently now, "we must not lose sight of who we are." A weight seems to lift from my shoulders as those words leave my mouth. They hang there suspended, like dust motes caught in sunlight streaming through the high windows above us. "Your Honor," Marcus interrupts again, with renewed confidence but now lacks its previous bite. He senses that I've shifted some unseen power dynamics today. "Enough." The judge's voice cuts through him sharply like glass shattering underfoot. All eyes turn expectantly toward her as she considers our words carefully before rendering a decision that could unravel everything further, or somehow knit us back together. As she raises her gavel one last time, adrenaline rushes through me. Anticipation tingles along every nerve ending in my body. What comes next could be devastating or redemptive. Will our family ever truly heal, or will this courtroom only serve to deepen our wounds further? I stood in the kitchen, my fingers tracing the worn edge of the countertop. The morning sun streamed through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Suddenly, the sharp sound of a chair scraping across the floor pulled me from my thoughts. My son Tyler burst in, his face flush with that familiar mix of excitement and anxiety. He held up a crumpled piece of paper. I recognized it. It was an old letter from his father, long before we had split. I reached out for it, taking a deep breath to steady my racing heart. "Tyler, where did you get this?" My voice was steadier than I felt. He shrugged, his youthful enthusiasm unwavering. The atmosphere shifted as he handed me the letter. I could feel its weight in my hands like an anchor pulling me back to memories I had tried to bury. Each word seemed to echo with lost promises and faded dreams. "Mom, we need to talk about Dad," he said firmly. The determination in his voice sparked something inside me. I met his gaze and realized this wasn't just a child's curiosity. It was his way of reaching out. As I opened my mouth to respond, the doorbell rang sharply through the silence of the house. I hesitated at first, but then glanced at Tyler, who was still watching me intently. "What if it's him?" Tyler asked softly, eyes wide, as if filled with hope and dread simultaneously. I felt a chill creep down my spine at that thought. "I'll get it," I said finally, already moving toward the front door, but feeling every step heavy with uncertainty about what lay beyond it. The court documents lay scattered across the table, edges crinkled from anxious hands. A faint rustle of papers and the distant murmur of hushed conversations filled the air as I tried to steady my racing thoughts. The air in the courtroom felt heavy, almost suffocating as the judge prepared to read his decision. My breath quickened at the thought of what was about to unfold. I glanced at Marcus, seated nearby, with an air of indifference that stung. His gaze flickered from me to his father, Leonard. Laughter had erupted from him earlier when he dismissed my contributions as mere spare change. The memory twisted in my stomach like a knife. The judge's voice cut through my spiraling thoughts, announcing the verdict with a calm detachment that seemed so unfair. My heart pounded against my ribcage as I leaned forward instinctively, straining to absorb every word. Did he really have the power to reshape our family dynamics so thoroughly? Just then, Denise shifted her weight in her seat, drawing everyone's attention momentarily. Her discomfort was palpable. I could see it in how her fingers drummed nervously against her thigh. Perhaps she sensed that her connection to this mess would soon be revealed. As I watched Leonard exchange glances with Marcus, I felt a swell of determination rise within me. This was not just about money or property anymore. It was about respect and honor. The judge's decision would force us all to confront our value within this family unit. I stood up abruptly before I could second-guess myself. "I want to address the court," I said with surprising firmness in my voice. Silence fell across the room like a blanket. In that moment, all eyes were on me, including Samuel's. He looked surprised but hopeful, as if he believed in a potential shift happening right before us. My resolve strengthened under their scrutiny as the judge nodded for me to proceed. With trembling hands, I gathered the court documents closer, their sharp corners digging into my palms like tiny reminders of everything that had led us here. "It's time we acknowledge what truly matters," I declared, glancing briefly at Marcus, who rolled his eyes but couldn't hide his intrigue. "I am not defined by just these papers or any amount of money," I continued passionately. "My value isn't measured by some legal jargon or what you think of me." A murmur rippled through the courtroom like water lapping at a shore, leaving me feeling both empowered and vulnerable simultaneously. The tension began shifting. Even Marcus sat up straighter now. Denise leaned forward slightly, her brow furrowing with concern, as if she feared where this would lead us next. Her reaction only fueled my desire to push further into this confrontation because it felt important. Important enough that my words mattered at this moment. But just as I prepared to elaborate further on how we needed to reassess our relationships and honor among ourselves rather than financial gain, the judge cleared his throat loudly and interjected. "Heather Parker," he began slowly, reading directly from his notes again, as if interrupting me completely shattered his authority. "In light of your recent statements and this new evidence," my stomach dropped at those words. New evidence? What could possibly be more shocking than what had already emerged? Marcus exchanged yet another glance with Leonard, whose expression darkened ominously as if they had been caught off guard too. It wasn't just me feeling uncertain anymore. Something major was brewing beneath this surface. I swallowed hard, while trying desperately not to let fear creep into my voice again, but instead found courage rising within once more. Something had shifted irreversibly during those few seconds where hope collided against uncertainty. What did this new evidence entail? Would it reinforce or dismantle everything we'd fought over so far? A loud plash rang through the living room as I dropped the heavy ceramic vase that had sat in our family for generations. Pieces scattered across the hardwood floor, glimmering shards catching the afternoon light like tiny stars fallen from the sky. My heart sank into my stomach as I knelt down to pick up the fragments, each one a reminder of the sentiment I just destroyed. I took a deep breath, feeling my chest tighten as I thought about how much this would hurt Mom. She loved that vase more than most family heirlooms. Flashes of her delicate fingers tracing its surface danced in my mind, and I imagined her face crumpling at the sight of it all broken on the floor. Just then, Emily entered with her eyes wide in surprise. "What happened?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. The way she stood there, hands clasped tightly together, made me realize she was more worried about me than the vase itself. I rubbed my palms against my jeans, feeling the coarse fabric grounding me. It slipped," I replied softly, trying to brush it off while hiding the panic rising within me. But deep down, I knew I needed to make things right before my mother came home. Taking a moment to gather myself, I decided to try to piece it back together, literally and metaphorically. This wasn't just an object, it was history. We can fix it, I asserted with newfound determination, confident that somehow we could salvage what was lost. Emily nodded, her shoulders relaxing slightly as if she sensed the shift in my resolve. As we gathered up the larger pieces and set them on an old kitchen towel, a small note slipped out from under where the vase had stood. It was yellowed and folded neatly, something Mom must have tucked away during a previous cleaning spree. My hands trembled slightly as I unfolded it, unsure of what new revelation might be contained within those lines. The words were faint and almost indecipherable under grime, but I felt an urgency swelling inside me as I pieced together fragments of ink that may change everything between us all. The weathered wood of the rocking chair feels familiar against my fingers, its surface smooth yet worn from years of use. I gripped the armrest tightly, my knuckles whitening as I try to steady my thoughts. Sitting out on the porch, I can hear the faint sound of crickets in the distance. They're chirping, a reminder that the world keeps turning. Samuel stands beside me, his hands shoved deep into his pockets as he watches Marcus and Denise argue just a few feet away. "Just spare change," Marcus had laughed earlier in court, dismissing my sacrifices like old coins tossed aside. The memory stings, like a slap in the face. It ignites something inside me. I glance at Leonard, who leans against the railing. His expression is unreadable, but I sense his unease. The weight of our family's honor hangs in the air, thick like humidity before a storm. Denise suddenly raises her voice, cutting through my thoughts. "You don't get it. It's not just about money." Her eyes flash with anger, and she points at Marcus accusingly. "Maybe you should have thought about that before you blew it all," Marcus retorts with a sneer, crossing his arms defiantly. My heart races at their escalating argument. Each word feels like an accusation thrown at me, a reflection of our fractured family ties. They may not realize how deeply their words cut. They're too wrapped up in their own grievances. As if sensing the tension mounting, Samuel shifts closer to me. He brushes his thumb along my forearm lightly, grounding me in this moment. His touch reminds me that while we may be arguing over trivial matters now, there are deeper issues lurking beneath the surface. I reach down into my pocket for the tin box receipt I had stashed there earlier today. My fingers brush against its edges, reminding me of what else is at stake here, more than just money or pride. Enough! I finally raise my voice above them both. The sound echoes off the wooden beams of our home, surprising even myself. They both turn to look at me. Silence falls over the porch like a heavy blanket. My heart pounds painfully in my chest. As I gather my thoughts, I kept this family afloat when times were tough. I say loudly, but firmly. My gaze moves between them, hoping they see more than just financial loss here. Marcus shifts uncomfortably under my scrutiny, and Denise's expression softens slightly before hardening again, as if struck by another wave of indignation. It was never just about money, I continue, feeling an unexpected surge of strength swell within me. As I speak those words aloud, a certain clarity washes over me. This isn't just an argument about finances anymore. It's about honor and connection among us all. Leonard steps forward then, breaking the silence with his own voice layered with vulnerability. "Leonard's right," he says quietly but with conviction that surprises everyone around us. Marcus looks stunned for a moment. Denise glances sideways at her father, as if searching for support in this unexpected alliance. A flicker of understanding passes between them at last. Just then, distant thunder rumbles ominously overhead, an uninvited portent of storms brewing nearby, yet somehow fitting for our current turmoil. "You two need to stop acting like children," Samuel adds with quiet authority, now grounding him as well. "We're better than this." The air shifts palpably. Something has changed within our dynamic on this porch filled with memories and secrets yet unwound. As if tethered together by invisible strings now reformed, we begin to grasp what it means to truly stand united once more. But as we exchange tentative glances filled with newfound resolve amongst one another, my fingers brush absently against that tin box receipt, tucked in my pocket once more. What details lie hidden within its folds could easily reshape everything we believe. I stood in the kitchen, hands planted firmly on the countertop. The smell of burnt toast clung to the air, making my stomach twist. My mind was racing as I remembered the voicemail from Sam. "We need to talk," he had said, his voice heavy with uncertainty. I had replayed it a dozen times already, each time feeling a jolt of anxiety tighten my chest. The soft ding of the microwave snapped me back. I turned to see my son, Daniel, walking in, his backpack slung over one shoulder. He dropped it with a thud and looked at me with wide eyes. "Is everything okay?" he asked, concern etching his young face. My heart sank a little more. I didn't want him to be drawn into this mess. I took a deep breath and forced myself to smile. "Just burnt breakfast," I replied, though my voice wavered slightly, giving away unease. His gaze lingered on me for a heartbeat longer, before he nodded and walked over to grab an apple from the bowl. With that small act, an idea began to form in my mind. I decided that I wouldn't let Sam's uncertainty disrupt our lives any longer. This was my family, and I needed to protect it. As I moved toward the phone on the wall, I felt a wave of determination wash over me. It was time to confront whatever lay behind those words. But just as I reached for the receiver, Daniel's phone buzzed loudly on the table next to him. The screen lit up with an unfamiliar number that made my pulse quicken uncomfortably.